Hello, homestead friends. Today I'm going to talk to you about something that can be very important on any homestead, and that is, what are you going to use to keep warm? Out where I live, most people use propane, but we're figuring that the cost of propane this winter will be at least double, and there's talk that it could be triple what it's been in the past. Now, to put that into perspective, some of my friends, during a very cold month of the year, they may pay $700 for propane, and that's before it went up double. So you can see that that's not going to work. Where I live is on the prairie, and one would look out and say, you know, there's not very many trees. How do you get enough firewood? Well, the fact that almost everybody uses propane leaves all the dead trees for me. And it seems like I'm always able to find what I need. I also get a lot of dimensional lumber from construction sites and so forth. I always ask, and usually they're happy to have someone take it away. I do avoid getting treated lumber. It's nasty stuff. I wouldn't want to burn that. But I do use like plywoods and OSB. I burn just about every kind I can get. Lots of elm here, and it burns pretty well, but I burn just about anything that will burn, provided it's not treated. I have a picture here of our wood stove, and we'll be talking a little bit about how I build a fire in that, and that may be a little bit less intuitive than you think. So let's talk a little bit about gathering firewood. The thing about firewood is, in order for it to be effective, you've got to have it cut and cured and stored in a dry place and ready to go. If it's wet or if it's covered with snow, you haven't got any firewood. And that's the way you have to think about it. I had a person who stayed here, and at midnight he'd be out with his chainsaw in the front yard cutting little pieces of wood so that he could get through that night. That is not what you want. You want to be well prepared. Out where I live, where it can be 25 below with a wind chill factor taking it down to 35 below, you can die if you don't have a way to keep warm. So this is important stuff. Although because my house is so well insulated, the walls are 5 feet thick on a good portion of it, I do get about 75% of my heat from the sun, and I only get about the other 25% I use this wood stove. So I'm only cutting maybe 2 or 3 cords a year, and that's doable. When I had a standard kind of house with just regular insulation, I was often cutting 15 to 20 cords a year. And in that situation, that's all you do is cut firewood. And that's not what I'm after. I'm trying to make it comfortable and easy. So let's talk about it a little bit. This is the best I've ever had it in 50 years of using firewood. I've always had kind of makeshift things where I had a tarp covering the pile and it was out somewhere. What we did is we got the old box from a box truck, which is 8 feet wide and 16 feet long, and we put all of our tools in one place, and that's important because if you have all your tools, it just makes it so much easier. We use a table saw to cut dimensional lumber. That's the stuff you know from a building site. We have 4 or 5 chainsaws, and you'll notice that all my chainsaws are electric chainsaws. I have 2 generators here on the property, and they're both relatively portable. So I would much rather deal with an electric chainsaw than fighting a gas chainsaw. They're loud and obnoxious, and they're hard to keep running at a level that I like. So I can pick up these electric chainsaws at garage sales and that sort of thing for 15, 20 bucks. I have 5 or 6 of them out there, and I have one really good one, which is a Makita, which is not inexpensive. And I've noticed that Stihl makes a very good electric chainsaw. When I say electric, I'm not talking about the kind with a battery. I like to be able to plug it into the generator. I know that the battery ones work well, but the batteries are very expensive. And if you're doing heavy cutting, I think you'll be happier if you can plug it into the generator. The way we set that up, we can stand in one place, cut the firewood, toss it into the pile, and we're done. It's inside, it's locked. That's getting to be more and more important. You don't want to go out there and realize that someone's taken all your firewood. It's locked, it's dry, and we can store a lot of firewood in an 8x16 building. And you'll see the way it's laid out. One thing, I was just talking to my friend from Oklahoma. We were talking about firewood, and she was trying to figure out a way where she was going to put it, and I told her about getting one of the box trucks. And she says, well, is it made out of wood? And I said, well, no, only the floor. And she said, you know, I've got so many termites that if there's any wood in it at all, if I put my firewood in there, they are going to just destroy the building. They're going to eat the building. Now, I had never thought about that. Where I live, we don't have enough water to keep a termite alive. So I don't really have to worry about termites out here. But if you live in a place like she does, where there's quite a bit of rain, quite a bit of moisture, and lots of wood, termites are a problem. So that's something to think about if you're going to build a place for your firewood. And that would be a great place for one of the metal containers, shipping containers. They're all metal. It would serve your purpose quite nicely. Let's say again, you need to have it cut, cured, stored in a dry place, and hopefully accessible. One thing that I do, the wood shed is out about, I guess 100 yards from the house, just the way it kind of turned out. I use some of my water barrels. In the summer, they're filled with water. In the winter, they're filled with firewood. They have a lid on them so they stay dry, and they're real close to the house. So in the wintertime, if the weather is particularly bad, I don't have to go clear out to the woodshed. So that is firewood. I want to show you a counterintuitive way to build a fire. Most people build fires the way I always built them for 50 years. And then I read an article, I believe it was in Mother Earth News, where this fellow showed me that you could get a much cleaner, faster fire by building the fire in a different way. So I've used it ever since, and it really makes a big difference on the amount of smoke that I create and just the cleanness of the fire. And this will just top off our little session on wood here. This is my old, it's called a Majestic. This is a ripoff of a Joe Tool back from the 70s. And I got this stove for $50 because nobody could lift it and move it. And I got a bunch of my friends and we lifted this monster. I think it weighs about 350 pounds. It's all cast iron. It's also brick lined, which is nice. It's a wonderful stove. And it does a really great job, and it's now, it was made in the 70s, so you do the math. And we've used it right along, and it's just, it heats beautifully. It's just the right size for this room. You don't want to get a stove that's too big or too small. Let me show you this counterintuitive way of building a fire. Usually what we do is we start with all the small stuff on the bottom, the kindling and everything, and then we stack the wood on top of it, the heavier wood, the bigger pieces. We're going to flip that and do it just opposite. When I first saw an article about this, I thought, well, that doesn't seem like it would work, but it works great. And it burns much hotter, much faster, which means that you're putting less smoke and less particulates into the air. So we'll start out. Now we could be using big, heavy chunks down on the bottom. But in this case, I'm just going to use stuff that's about the size of a 2x4. This time of year, that's kind of what I use. We don't need, because we have so much sun here and we have so much passive solar, we don't need really big fires yet. So this is a pretty good size. This is a piece of cedar from a fence, untreated. And I'm just going to put about 4 chunks of wood. This would be my heavier stuff. Okay. And then I'm going to put my accelerant down. Here's another thing. You might notice I have right here, I've got all the firewood, everything I need, newspaper for an accelerant, and kindling, and space for a couple of these bins. And then I can put it right here where it's really handy, close to the stove, and it's nice and neat and clean. I don't like to have a big mess, and firewood's pretty messy. So what I'm going to do, I put in my bigger pieces. Now I'm going to put my accelerant on here. This newspaper works out pretty good. And use a lot. Don't try to be chintzy with the newspaper. The more you put in there, the hotter it's going to be faster. And so we're just going to put that in. Now we're getting there. That's quite a bit. Then we're going to take our kindling. Normally we put the kindling on the bottom, but in this method, we're going to put it on the top. Kind of, like I say, a little counterintuitive, but man, I like the way this works. So I just, and use plenty of kindling. That's something the little kids can do. They can go out and help get the kindling, little sticks and stuff. You need to make this a family deal. When we're all sitting around the fire on a cold night, you can say, "See, Johnny, you really do matter in this operation. We're warm tonight because you went out there and worked with Dad." That's a good deal. All right, so we can put our boxes away here so this stays nice and neat. But that is how you do it. What happens is it burns from the top, and as that kindling falls down on top of this larger wood, it very quickly ignites it, and you get a smokeless fire basically, and that's what we're after. This is a really critical issue. Yes, fires can be dangerous, but people for 10,000 years have been using them and we're not all dead. So this is certainly doable, and you can tell your insurance company that. Good luck. The main things, I just have some real simple things. One of them is, of course, have a good fire extinguisher right close to your fireplace. I have one of these in the kitchen. I have one here by the wood stove. Very important to have. If you have a problem, then you're ready to address it right there, and that's a good thing. And you can check on, these are really inexpensive at Walmart, and I get one that's a general purpose kind of fire extinguisher, works extremely well. Another thing you might want to consider, since you are using a lot of oxygen, a carbon monoxide alarm. And again, these are very inexpensive. You can put these somewhere. Don't get too close to the fireplace with them because you won't get a real accurate reading, and they may tend to go off too much. These, and then of course your normal fire alarms around the house, are very important. The main thing is this: if you have a fire, don't worry about anything else. Get yourself out of there. People think, well, yeah, I need to go in and, and get Muffy the cat, and, maybe I should pick up a few things, in the house. No. Get out of there. It's not worth your life to go in there and get some checkbooks. So realize that this is serious business. If you get a fire going, it can be deadly. But if you take these simple precautions, you will probably avoid having a fire. I've been burning firewood for my main source of heat for about 50 years, and I've never had a problem, but we try to be prepared. One final thing here that's probably the most critical, and that is the ash can. So many fires are started when people clean the ashes out of their wood stove and they put them in a cardboard box or something like that and set it out on the deck. I had a good friend that lived 5 miles from here, had a beautiful place up in the mountains, and his niece was up there visiting, put the ashes out there on the deck, burned everything down to the ground. This happens so often. You want to make sure that you have a metal can with a lid. It's designed for ashes, and any good hardware store will offer you one. Of course, you can go to Amazon as well. So this is really important. And finally, you want to make sure that occasionally, and I've done this for so many years, I have the equipment that I need for cleaning my fireplace pipe, the chimney up top, and I usually do that, about every 2 or 3 years. I can visually inspect it because it's a very short pipe. I can see all the way down, and I can visually inspect it from the top, and I can see if creosote is building up in there. It really depends on the kind of wood that you're using, how fast that creosote will build up, and also how you're building your fires. If you build good hot fires, you won't have so much trouble with creosote. Here's another little trick that you can do to help keep creosote down. You can go buy this fancy smancy fireplace cleaner, they call it, chimney cleaner. What it is salt. Just go buy one of those salt containers, and in the winter time, a couple of times during the winter, when you have a really hot fire going, when it's really cold out, I just toss the whole container in there, in the container, and that crystallizes and makes the creosote drop away. It's really quite effective and pretty cheap, the cost of one little cardboard container of salt, and do that a couple of times a year. Well, those are some tips that'll help you stay out of trouble as you burn your firewood. Be safe out there. Well, that's it. It's good to have you here. I think you're going to find that having some firewood ready to go is going to be very important. We do have propane, and we try to store up a little propane because we use that for cooking and so forth. And, you know, we have other fuels around that we might need, but wood and solar are the two things that we use to create all of our heat. And we get most of it from solar, but we live in Colorado, where we get 310 sunny days a year. Well, friends, I wish you well. Be careful when you're cutting. It's dangerous. You can really cut yourself up when you're cutting firewood, so be careful. Think about the electric saws. Go out there and get ready, because this looks like it could be a cold winter. Thanks for being with us. Keep your eyes on the sky. He's coming back real soon.
Yes, we're all in a master plan. Though the things we do are just grains of sand, when these things are touched by the master's hand, then our lives turn into mountains in a master plan. Yes, our lives turn into mountains in a master plan.
And I am not going to light it because it's actually 80 degrees as we're filming this.